Hello everyone. We are presenting now the seventh part of our discussion on voice change. We discussed different rules of voice change throughout the sixth part. This module is going to show you some exception and changes we find at the time of voice change. This is the advanced part of this topic and it is very important. So all of you need to be very careful. So are you ready? Let's start. Now we'll discuss about voice change for reflexive objects. Before going to discuss about reflexive objects, we need to know what are the reflexive pronouns. See the definition. The pronouns ending in self or selves are called reflexive pronouns. This definition is taken from Highlights of English by P.K. Mukherjee. So the pronouns ending in self or self, for example, himself, herself, myself, yourself, etc. These reflexive pronouns are used as reflexive objects. Now, see the rule for voice change in case of reflexive objects. The reflexive object cannot be the subject in the passive. So myself, himself, herself, these cannot be the subject in the passive. So the subject in the active and the subject in the passive will be the same. So the both the cases subject will be the same. Except this, general rules and other rules will be applicable here. Now see some examples. The first example, he killed himself. Here he subject, killed main verb, himself reflexive object. So himself cannot be used as a subject. Okay, so we need to use he again because subject in the active voice and the subject in the passive voice will be the same in this case. So we use he. Then was helping verb because killed in past form. So we use was. Then third form of killed. Then by, then reflexive object himself. See the next example. She hanged herself. Here she subject, hanged main verb, herself reflexive object. So again we cannot use herself as a subject. So we need to use she as a subject. So we use she. Then hanged is in the past form. So we use was as a be verb. Then third form of hanged. Then by, then herself. Thus, we can change voice change in case of reflexive object. Now, we'll discuss about voice change for complementary or factitive objects. Now, question is that what is complementary or for factitive object? It completes the sense of the objects. So, the words or the object that completes the sense of the object is called complementary or factitive objects. The complementary object cannot be the subject in the passive, so we cannot use as a subject in the passive voice. Now see some examples. The first example, they made him king. Okay, here they subject, made main verb, him object and king complementary objects. So here king complete the sense of the object him. That's why it is a complementary or factitive object. So at first we cannot use king as a subject, so we need to use him, this object. Okay, so him change into he at first, then was because made is in the past form, then third form of made, then we use complementary object king, then by, then they change into them. Thus we can change the voice. Now see the next example. His friends called him a fool. Here his friend subject, called main verb, him object and a fool complementary object. So at first we need to use object him. When it is used as a subject, it will be changed into he. So he, then was because called in the past form, then third form of called, then complementary object a fool, then by, then a subject his friends we use. Thus, we can change voice change in case of complementary or factitive object. So we need to remember here, we cannot use complementary object as a subject in the passive voice. Now we'll discuss passive voice without by. Some passive verbs do not take by after them. So in some cases we find some passive verbs do not take by after them. See some examples. The first example, he knows her. He knows her. Okay. So at first we use her, that is changed into she. Then knows main verb is in present tense, so we use is. Then third form of know, that is known, and after known we it always takes to, not by. Then he changed it to him. So look at this. Okay, known to. So after know it always takes to, not by. So that's why it is called passive without by. Now see the next example. She married ribbon. Okay, so at first we use ribbon, then married main verb is in the past form, so we use was. Then third form of married, then again in place of by we use to, and then she changed into her. So married also doesn't take by, it always takes to. So here we find two example, one is known and married. So know and married verb when is used in passive form, it always take to, not by. Now see the next example. Her manner shocked Priya. Her manner subject, shocked verb, and Priya object. So at first we use Priya, then helping verb was, because shocked is in the past form. Then third form of shocked, then at. Okay, so shocked takes at, not by. Then the subject her manner we used here. Now see the next example. Tears filled her eyes. Tears subject, filled main verb, her eyes object. So we use at first her eyes. Okay. Then where, because filled in the past form and her eyes are plural. So we used where. Then third form of filled, then with. So fill also takes with after it, not by. Then tears. Now see the next example. The news pleased us. The news subject, pleased main verb, and us object. So we use us, that change into we. Okay, then where, helping verb, then third form of pleased, then with. So we also find please also takes with after it, and then the subject news. Here we need to remember by is used for living things, for any person or animals, and with is used for non-living things. For example, tears, the news. Here we can use with, not by. So thus we can change the voice without using by. Here there are some specific words that takes a specific kind of preposition. For example, filled takes with, shocked at, pleased with, etc. Now we'll discuss passive without DOER. In some cases, we do not need to use by plus subject. We do not need to use this. When we find as a subject someone, somebody, people, everyone, everybody, anyone, anybody, one, etc., we do not need to use these in the passive voice. So if we find this kind of word, someone, somebody, people, everyone, everybody, anyone, anybody, one, etc., we do not need to use this. So this is called passive without DOER. Now see some examples. The first example, someone has put out the light. Here someone, subject, has helping verb, put out main verb, and the light object. So we use at first the light object, then has. For has we need to use been, then third form of put out, and here we remove by someone, so we do not need to use it. Next, people speak English all over the world. So people subject, speak verb, main verb, English object, and all over the other parts. So at first we use English, then is helping verb, then third form of speak spoken, and then other parts all over the world. And by people is removed, so we don't need to use by people. Now see the next example. We expect good news. So we subject expect main verb and good news object. So at first we use good news, then helping verb is, then third form of expect, that is expected, and by us is removed here because it is implies, don't need to use it. Now see the next example. The police arrested him. The police subject, arrested main verb, him object. So we use at first him, that change into he, then arrested is a past form, so we use helping verb was, then third form of arrested, that is arrested, and by the police is removed because it is implied, you don't need to use here. Now see the next example. One should obey one's parents. Okay, so one subject should helping verb, obey main verb, and one's parents objects. But look at this, we don't need to word one and once, we remove this, so we use parents, then helping verb should, then be, then third form of obey, it is obeyed, and we remove one and once, we don't need to use it. This is, thus we can change the voice without using this kind of y after by. Now we'll discuss voice change for the sentences starting with late in the active. Some sentences may start with late in the active voice. Okay, in these cases, we need to use this rule. At first, we need to use late, then object, then be, then verb third form, then by, then subject. Now see some examples. Let her buy a mobile. So here, let we see the example. You can see that the sentence starts with let, then her subject, then by main verb, and a mobile an object. So we use at first let, then object a mobile, then be, then third form of by bought, then by, then her. Now see the next example. Let us forget the quarrel. At first we use let, then the object quarrel, then we use be, then third form of forget, that is forgotten, then we use by, then us. Thus we can change voice for the sentences starting with let in the active voice. So if you find this kind of sentence, so you can do voice change in this process. For this concept, I need to take help from Highlights of English by P.K. Mukherjee and a textbook of Higher English Grammar, Composition and Translation by P.K. Desharkar. Hopefully, all of you are able to understand today's discussions. You need to study the rules again and again, and practice is necessary. Enjoy the presentation and learn happily. That's for today. Thank you so much.